On an August night in 1987, Detroit's East Side became the hunting ground for one of the most methodical family vendettas in American urban history. Four men moved through neighborhoods they knew like their own backyards, armed with loaded weapons and a list of 9 names. By dawn, 8 young men would be dead, eliminated with military precision across multiple locations. The hunters weren't rival gang members or professional criminals. They were a father and his 3 sons, driven to extraordinary violence by what many would consider an ordinary street confrontation. If you're prepared to hear this story, hit that like button and subscribe. But understand this narrative involves real violence that changed lives forever. Detroit in 1987 wasn't just struggling, it was dying. The city that once housed nearly 2 million people had shrunk to barely over 1 million. Entire blocks sat abandoned on the east side, with broken windows staring out like dead eyes, and grass growing wild through cracked sidewalks. Every third streetlight worked, if you were lucky. The August heat that year was brutal, pushing into the 90s during the day and trapping itself in concrete and asphalt so thick you could feel the city sweating even at midnight. The air carried the smell of industrial decay from shuttered auto plants, grease from the few remaining carry-out restaurants, and something else residents recognized but rarely discussed openly: the sweet chemical odor of crack cocaine being cooked in apartments and abandoned houses throughout the neighborhood. This was the height of Detroit's crack epidemic. Street crews battled over corners and territory with violence that shocked even veteran police officers. That year alone, over 300 young people under 18 would be shot in Detroit. 35 would die. In this environment, respect wasn't just important. It was survival currency. Your reputation protected you when the law couldn't, which was most of the time in forgotten neighborhoods where police response was measured in hours, not minutes. Marcus Williams understood this code better than most men his age. At 43, the Vietnam veteran had been aged by more than just years. 2 decades of manual labor, and the streets had carved deep lines around his eyes and left his hands thick with calluses from his time working the assembly line at Chrysler until the layoffs hit. A thin scar ran through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from Vietnam where shrapnel had come within inches of taking his eye. Every morning, Marcus followed the same routine in his small house on the east side. Wake at 5:45, make coffee in the percolator his late wife had bought years earlier, smoke a single cigarette while reading the Detroit Free Press, then wake his 3 sons for whatever work they could find, legitimate or otherwise. Marcus had married his wife in 1962, right before shipping out to Vietnam. They'd had 3 sons together. She'd been his anchor through the nightmares that followed him home from war, through the difficult transition back to civilian life, through 20 years of trying to build something lasting for their boys. Then, in 1985, cancer took her, and something inside Marcus had broken that never quite healed. What Marcus valued most wasn't material possessions. It was the belief that a man could work hard, raise his sons properly, keep them away from the streets, and build something meaningful that would endure. By 1987, that belief was barely surviving. Without his wife's steady income, the family was struggling financially. Marcus picked up whatever work he could find: moving jobs, handyman work, occasional security at local clubs. It wasn't enough. His 3 sons helped however they could. The oldest worked warehouse jobs when available. The middle son did landscaping. The youngest, at 18, was supposed to be finishing high school but kept missing classes. What made Marcus proud was that he'd managed to keep all 3 boys away from the drug trade that consumed so many young men in their neighborhood. In an area where 14-year-olds ran drugs and 20-year-olds made more money in a week than Marcus earned in a month. Keeping his sons clean required constant vigilance, and the kind of respect that came from being known as a solid man who didn't start trouble but wouldn't back down from it either. The neighborhood knew Marcus Williams. They knew he'd served his country, worked the plant for 13 years, was raising 3 sons alone after losing his wife to cancer. They knew he was struggling but handling it with dignity. That respect was everything to Marcus. It was all he had left to give his sons in a world that had taken almost everything else. The young men who controlled various corners and blocks on the east side weren't organized crime in any traditional sense. Most were just trying to survive the only way a broken economy had left available to them. 27-year-old Dwayne Harris was one of these men. Originally from the housing projects, he'd grown up hard with an absent father and a mother who worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. By 1987, Dwayne controlled several street corners in the area, managing maybe 15 guys who moved product, collected money, and enforced territory. He wasn't operating at the level of the major drug organizations that controlled significant portions of the city's trade, but he was making enough to support not just himself but family members who depended on him. His mother was battling diabetes, and he paid for her medications. His younger brother was trying to stay in school, and Dwayne made sure he had lunch money and decent shoes. Dwayne had dreams beyond street life. He was good with cars and imagined someday having enough money saved to get out of the game and open a legitimate garage. He had a woman named Keisha and a 3-year-old daughter named Jasmine who lived across town. Every Sunday, he visited his daughter, bringing presents and trying to be the father he'd never had. In the harsh ecosystem of 1987 Detroit, Dwayne Harris was doing what thousands of other young black men were doing. Surviving the only way available when factories closed, fathers disappeared, and neighborhoods emptied out. The crack trade hadn't created these broken communities. It had simply filled the vacuum left by economic collapse. For years, Marcus Williams and Dwayne Harris had coexisted in the same East Side world without significant conflict. They knew each other by sight and reputation. Marcus sometimes worked security at clubs where Dwayne and his crew would appear. They'd nod to each other with the mutual respect that existed between an older generation and a younger one. Marcus didn't approve of what Dwayne did for a living, but he understood the circumstances that led to it, and Dwayne respected that Marcus was keeping his sons away from street life. That fragile understanding died on the night of August 13, 1987. The temperature had finally dropped to the low 80s by 9:30 that Thursday evening. Marcus was walking north after finishing a handyman job that had earned him $75 cash. He wore his old Chrysler plant jacket and carried a small toolbox, looking forward to getting home, maybe having a beer and catching the end of the Tigers game on television. At the corner where 2 major streets intersected, Dwayne Harris and 6 members of his crew were standing outside a liquor store. They'd been drinking, smoking, conducting the kind of business that happened after dark in neighborhoods where legitimate commerce had long since fled. One of them, a 19-year-old named Brandon, bumped into Marcus as he walked past. "Watch it, old man," Brandon said. Marcus stopped, turned, and looked at the young man. "You bumped into me, young brother. That should have been the end of it." A small moment of disrespect, easily resolved with an acknowledgement and maybe an apology. But Brandon was showing off for the crew, and Dwayne, who'd had too much to drink, made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Old man, you got something to say?" Dwayne stepped forward. Marcus recognized him immediately. "Dwayne, no disrespect intended. Your boy bumped me. Just want acknowledgement." What happened next would be witnessed by 37 people from windows, cars, and sidewalks throughout the area. Dwayne laughed and said something cruel about Marcus being washed up, a has-been from the plant, a man who couldn't even keep his wife alive. The words were calculated to cut deep, and they succeeded. Marcus dropped his toolbox and took a step toward Dwayne. The beating lasted 3 minutes. 6 young men in their 20s against one 43-year-old man. They knocked Marcus to the pavement and kicked him in the ribs, back, and face. Someone took his wallet. Someone else took his wedding ring, the one he'd never removed since his wife died 2 years earlier. 37 people watched it happen. Not one person intervened. When it was over, Marcus lay on the concrete bleeding from his nose and mouth, his left eye already swelling shut. He could hear Dwayne's voice above him saying, "Old man, you don't walk these streets like you own them anymore. Your time is done." Marcus lay there for maybe 60 seconds after they walked away. Then he pushed himself to his hands and knees, then to his feet. He retrieved his toolbox and began the slow, painful walk back to his house, blood dripping onto his work jacket. His oldest son was sitting on the front porch when Marcus came up the steps at 10:17 that night. The young man took one look at his father's battered face and started to stand, but Marcus held up a hand. "Get your brothers. Kitchen table, 5 minutes." The son saw something in his father's eyes he'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more dangerous. He went inside to wake his younger brothers while Marcus stood alone on the porch, gently touching his face and feeling the damage. His wedding ring was gone. The ring that connected him to the woman who'd made him promise to keep their sons safe. Inside the house, at the kitchen table where his family had shared thousands of meals over the years, Marcus told his 3 sons exactly what had happened. He described the beating, the humiliation, the 37 witnesses who did nothing. He told them about the wedding ring being taken like it meant nothing at all. Then he told them what was going to happen next. His oldest son, 24 years old, immediately started objecting. He talked about calling the police, about legal options, about other ways to handle the situation. But Marcus just looked at him with those cold eyes and said something that would echo in that kitchen for the rest of their lives. "Your mama made me promise to keep you boys clean, to build something that would last. But if I let this stand, what am I teaching you? That a man can be beaten in the street like a dog and do nothing? That your father's respect means nothing? That we're nothing?" His middle son, quieter than his brothers, simply asked, "What do you need us to do?" Oh, the youngest, barely 18, didn't say anything at all. He just nodded. What Marcus didn't know as he sat at that table with his sons in the early morning hours was that his decision would set in motion events that would leave 8 young men dead and 4 members of his own family either dead or imprisoned for life. The east side of Detroit would be marked forever by what happened in the next 72 hours. The Sunday before the beating, Marcus had taken his sons to visit their mother's grave, something they did every month. They'd arranged fresh flowers on the headstone and stood quietly in the summer heat. Marcus had told his boys how proud their mother would have been of them, mentioning job prospects and school plans. It was a peaceful moment, a normal family ritual that gave no hint of the darkness that was coming. After the Thursday night beating and the kitchen table meeting, Marcus couldn't sleep. His ribs ached where they'd kicked him. His left eye had swollen completely shut. He lay in the bed he'd shared with his wife for 23 years, staring at the ceiling and running his thumb over the place where his wedding ring used to be. At 3:30 in the morning on Friday, Marcus got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a spiral notebook. The same kind his wife had used for grocery lists. He wrote down 9 names. These weren't strangers. He knew some of their families, had grown up in the same neighborhoods. In another version of Detroit, the one that died with the auto plants, some of these young men might have worked alongside him. They might have been friends with his sons. But the Detroit was gone. This was what remained. A place where 37 people watched a man get beaten and did nothing. Where respect was the only currency that mattered because everything else had been stripped away. When his oldest son came into the kitchen at 5:45, he found his father at the table with the notebook. "You sure about this?" the young man asked. Marcus looked up at his son, seeing his late wife's eyes looking back at him. "Your brother Antoine is 18, same age as some of these boys out there. If I let them beat me in the street and do nothing, what happens next time he walks past them? What happens to you? What happens to Curtis? We could go to the police?" Marcus laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "The police aren't coming to the east side to investigate a street corner beating. You know that. Then we leave, move somewhere else, start over. With what money, and where are we going to go that we don't carry this with us?" Marcus shook his head. "No. This ends one way or the other." Over the next 2 days, Friday and Saturday, the Williams family gathered intelligence. The middle son talked to people he knew on the streets, people who owed him small favors, people who'd witnessed what happened to his father and felt some kind of way about it. The oldest son drove around the east side, noting addresses and watching routines, learning the patterns of movement that would matter when the time came. While the Williams family planned in their small house, Dwayne Harris was at his mother's place helping her with groceries. His mother was 52 years old, worked as a nursing assistant at the hospital, and was slowly losing her battle with diabetes. Her feet hurt constantly, and her vision was starting to blur. "When you going to get out of the game?" she asked while Dwayne put canned goods in her cupboard. "Soon, Mama, soon as I get enough saved up." "That's what you said last year. That's what you've been saying since you were 23. She rubbed her swollen ankles. "I don't want to bury you. I don't want to visit you in prison. I want to see you with a real job. Maybe married to Keisha, giving me more grandbabies." Dwayne kissed his mother's forehead. "I'm working on it, Mama. I promise." He had no idea that someone was working on him. On Saturday afternoon, Marcus's nephew showed up at the house. 22 years old, he'd been staying with the Williams family on and off since his own mother died of an overdose 2 years earlier. He was shorter than Marcus's sons but compact and strong, with a scar on his neck from a bottle fight. When he saw his uncle's battered face, he immediately asked who had done it. Marcus told him. "What we doing about it? We're handling it?" The nephew didn't ask for details. He just nodded and said, "I'm in." That made 4. Marcus needed weapons. He still had his old service pistol from Vietnam, a Colt that he'd somehow managed to bring back and had kept wrapped in oiled cloth in his closet. But one handgun wasn't enough for what he was planning. That Saturday evening, Marcus drove across the city to visit a man who'd grown up 3 blocks from him 40 years earlier. This man had done time for armed robbery in the 70s, but now made money buying and selling firearms outside the legal system. When Marcus knocked on the door, the man took one look at his battered face and stepped aside to let him in. "Who got you?" "Need to buy some pieces. Can you help?" The man studied Marcus for a long moment. They'd known each other since childhood. "This going to come back on me?" "No. Whatever happens, your name stays out of it." The man disappeared into a back room and returned with 2 revolvers wrapped in newspaper. Both used, both untraceable. $400 for both. Marcus only had $320 in his pocket. Everything he'd saved from the last 2 weeks of work. The man looked at the money, looked at Marcus's swollen eye, looked at the quiet desperation of someone he'd known for 40 years. "320 is fine. I'm giving you a deal because I knew your wife. She was good people." Driving back across the city, Marcus felt the weight of the weapons on the passenger seat. He could still stop. could throw the guns in the Detroit River, go home, tell his sons they were going to handle this differently. Move to another neighborhood, let it go. But then he touched his left hand, feeling the empty space where his wife's ring used to be, the ring those young men had taken like it was nothing. Like 23 years of marriage and 2 years of mourning meant nothing at all. No, some things you don't walk away from. At home, Marcus laid out the weapons on his bed, the old Colt from Vietnam, the 2 revolvers from his childhood friend. His oldest son had a street-acquired pistol he'd bought for protection 2 years earlier and never fired. 4 guns, 4 men. His middle son came into the bedroom and looked at the weapons. "When?" "Tonight. We start tonight." "You sure? Once we do this." Marcus looked at his son. "I'm sure. I've been sure since Thursday night when I was laying on that sidewalk with 37 people watching." His youngest appeared in the doorway. At 18, he still had softness in his face that hard living hadn't erased. "Dad, I'm scared." Marcus pulled his youngest son into a hug, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I know, I'm scared too. But we're Williams men. We don't let people treat us like we're nothing." That night, after his sons had gone to their rooms, Marcus sat alone in the living room looking at photographs on the wall, his wedding day, his wife holding their first baby at the hospital, the boys at various ages, birthday parties, school photos. The last picture of all of them together, taken 6 months before his wife's diagnosis. Marcus knew what he was about to do would erase all of that, would transform him from a Vietnam veteran, factory worker, devoted husband and father into something else entirely. A name in the newspaper, a cautionary tale, a man who crossed a line that decent people don't cross. But what choice did he have? In the economy of respect that governed the East Side in 1987, you either responded to disrespect or you became prey. There was no middle ground, no peaceful resolution. The city had died, taking its institutions and protections with it, leaving only the law of the street. At 2:30 in the morning on Sunday, Marcus walked quietly to his bedroom. He picked up the Colt, checked the magazine, and chambered around. The familiar weight felt right in his hand. Muscle memory from a different war in a different place, but somehow exactly the same. He should have felt something. Horror at what he was about to become. Disgust with himself. Fear of consequences. But all he felt was cold, clear certainty. This had been inevitable since Thursday night. Maybe it had been inevitable since his wife died and took with her the last anchor keeping Marcus connected to the version of himself that believed in rules and law and civilization. At 3 in the morning, Marcus woke his sons and nephew. They dressed in dark clothes. Nothing distinctive, no jewelry, no colors, nothing that would make them memorable. The weapons were distributed. Instructions were given. Addresses were reviewed. His oldest son tried one more time. "Dad, we can't take this back. You understand that?" Marcus understood perfectly. "We're already gone. We left Thursday night on that corner. What we're doing now is just finishing what they started." At 3:45, Marcus walked to his wife's side of the bed. Her pillow still smelled faintly like her. He picked up the framed photo from her nightstand. Their wedding day, both of them smiling like they'd figured out some secret about happiness. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the photo. "I know I promised to keep the boys safe. I know I promised to do right. But they took your ring. They took my respect. They took the last piece of you I had left. I can't let that stand." He set the photo down gently, turned off the bedroom light, and walked to the living room where his sons and nephew waited. No one spoke. What was there to say? They all knew what came next. At 4 in the morning on Sunday, August 16th, 1987, 4 men left the house on the east side. The city was quiet at that hour, in the darkest part of night just before dawn. Streetlights flickered. A few cars passed on the main roads. The air still held the day's heat, thick and oppressive. Marcus drove with his slipping transmission. His oldest son sat in the passenger seat. The other 2 sat in the back. No one turned on the radio. The only sound was the engine and the soft rattle of ammunition in coat pockets. They drove slowly past the corner where Marcus had been beaten. Someone had spray-painted gang tags on the sidewalk. The liquor store was closed, security gate pulled down. It looked like any other corner in Detroit's east side. Nothing special. Nothing worth dying over, but worth killing for. That was the question Marcus had already answered. By noon on Sunday, while the Williams family finalized their preparations in that cramped house, Dwayne Harris was celebrating his daughter's 3rd birthday party. The celebration took place in a small backyard with a kiddie pool and hamburgers cooking on a charcoal grill. 3-year-old Jasmine wore a pink dress. Birthday cake frosting smeared across her tiny face as she laughed and tried to feed her father cake with her small hands. Kevin Thompson was there with his own daughter. Terrence Mitchell had brought presents. Even young Ronald Harris, Dwayne's 19-year-old brother, showed up between study sessions for his community college classes. None of them knew. None of them had any idea that someone had written their names in a spiral notebook and was coming for them in the darkness. At 11:47 that night, Marcus Williams drove away from his house carrying 3 loaded weapons, accompanied by 3 sons, 1 nephew, and a conviction harder than Detroit concrete itself. What happened in the next 72 hours would leave 8 young men dead and mark the east side forever. The temperature had dropped to 73 degrees by 11:50, but humidity made it feel warmer. The east side of Detroit sat quiet in that dead hour between Saturday night chaos and Sunday morning church bells. Streetlights cast orange pools on cracked pavement. In the distance, a car alarm went off and stopped. The smell of hot asphalt and garbage hung in the still air. Marcus sat in his car with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel. Kevin Thompson's mother's house sat 60 yards ahead. A 2-story brick building with an iron security gate and a porch light that flickered every few seconds. Through a second-floor window, Marcus could see the blue glow of a television. His hands didn't shake. That surprised him. He'd expected fear, maybe even doubt at this final moment. Instead, he felt cold, crystalline clarity, like he was watching himself from outside his body, observing this version of Marcus Williams about to become something irreversible. He picked up the Colt from Vietnam, checked the magazine one more time. 7 rounds. Breathed deep. Last chance to turn back, his oldest son said quietly from the passenger seat. Marcus looked at his son, saw his late wife's eyes looking back at him, worried. "We're past that point." The young man nodded slowly. "Then let's finish this." Marcus opened the door. The dome light had been disabled earlier. No point advertising their presence. 4 men climbed out and moved through darkness like shadows, spreading out according to the plan they'd rehearsed. At 11:52, Kevin Thompson emerged from his mother's house, pulling the security gate closed behind him. 22 years old, wearing a Detroit Pistons jersey and jeans. He was heading to his car parked at the curb, had plans to meet someone. Probably would have been back in an hour. He saw Marcus standing on the sidewalk 10 feet away. Recognition flickered across his face. Started to say something. The shot from Marcus's pistol cut the night in half. Kevin fell backward against the security gate. The sound echoed down the street, bouncing off brick houses and empty lots. Marcus stood there, weapon still raised, looking at the first body. The first name crossed off his list. He waited for guilt, for horror, for something human. Felt nothing but cold satisfaction that it had started. Inside the house, someone screamed. Lights came on. Marcus was already moving back to the car, his middle son covering him with another weapon, the oldest son and youngest son and nephew climbing in fast. The transmission slipped between gears as Marcus accelerated away from the street. At 12:17 in the morning, they found Terrence Mitchell at an after-hours spot on 7 Mile Road, a basement club where people went to drink and smoke and conduct business when legitimate establishments closed. The music, bass-heavy funk that rattled windows, covered the sound of 4 men entering through the back door. Terrence was at the bar laughing with 2 women, a beer in his hand. 25 years old, had been saving money for 2 years to move to Atlanta, start fresh somewhere the streets didn't own him, had $3,400 hidden in his mother's basement, wrapped in plastic inside a heating duct. He turned and saw Marcus Williams coming through the crowd. The laughter died on his face. Understanding replaced it. Quick calculation of distances, exits, chances. "Mr. Williams, listen." Marcus raised the weapon. People scattered, screaming, pushing toward doors. Terrence tried to move behind the bar. The sons blocked that path. Nowhere to run in a basement with 40 people suddenly fighting for 2 exits. "You were there Thursday night," Marcus said, voice flat. "You watched." "I didn't touch you, man. I swear I didn't." "You watched. 37 people watched." Marcus's finger tightened. "That's enough." The shot. Terrence fell behind the bar, bottles shattered, whiskey mixing with blood on dirty floor tiles. Marcus walked back out through chaos. Nobody stopped him. Nobody called the police. Not in that neighborhood, not for that kind of business. The code of the street worked both ways. At that moment, 3 miles north, Dwayne Harris was lying in bed next to Keisha, their 3-year-old daughter asleep in the next room. He couldn't sleep, kept thinking about that older man he'd beaten on Thursday. Something about it didn't sit right. The man's eyes when he was down hadn't shown fear, had shown something colder. Calculation. Dwayne got up, walked to the window, looked out at the street. Everything quiet, normal. He went back to bed, put his arm around Keisha, and closed his eyes. He had no idea that 2 of his crew were already dead. At 12:44, Brandon Lewis lived with his grandmother 3 blocks from Marcus's own house. Marcus had known Brandon's grandmother for 20 years. Miss Evelyn Lewis, 71 years old, had brought Marcus a casserole when his wife died, had told him she was praying for his family. Now, Marcus sat in his car looking at her house, knowing her grandson was inside. The kid who'd started it all by bumping into him. 19 years old, probably in there sleeping, dreaming whatever young men dream about. "That's Miss Evelyn's house," his youngest son said from the back seat, voice small. "I know. She's good people. She brought us food after Mama." "I know," Marcus repeated. His hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles went white. His oldest son leaned forward. "We can skip this one. Move on to the next name." Marcus sat there for 5 full minutes, the longest 5 minutes of the night. Thought about Miss Evelyn's casserole, how it was the first thing he'd been able to eat in the days after his wife's funeral. Thought about innocent people caught in crossfire they didn't deserve. But Brandon wasn't innocent. Brandon had been there, had laughed, had participated. "No," Marcus said finally. He made his choice Thursday night. They waited until 1:10 when Brandon left the house, heading out to meet someone, moving quick and quiet so he wouldn't wake his grandmother. They took him 2 blocks away in an empty lot where abandoned cars rusted under the Detroit sky. It was quick, professional. Brandon never saw it coming. Marcus walked back to the car, looked at his hands holding the weapon. These hands had held his newborn sons, had changed diapers and tied shoes and taught them to ride bikes, had held his wife's hand through 23 years of marriage. Now they were a killer's hands. The transformation was complete. At 1:38, they'd eliminated 3. 6 names remained on Marcus's list, but dawn was coming. The city would wake up. Police would connect the dots. Time was running short. His oldest son made a suggestion. "We split up, cover more ground." "No," Marcus said immediately. "We stay together. We do this right." "Ain't nothing right about what we're doin'," the young man's voice cracked. "But if we're doing it, we do it fast before somebody stops us." Marcus looked at his 3 sons and nephew. All of them had blood on their hands now. All of them changed forever. He wanted to tell them he was sorry. Wanted to explain that this was the only way. Wanted to say something that would make sense of the insanity, but there was nothing to say. They'd crossed the line together. Now they had to finish it together. "All right, you and your cousin take the next address. Middle son, youngest, you're with me. We meet back at the house by dawn." They separated. 2 cars now instead of 1. The hunt accelerating. While Marcus Williams hunted through the east side, 3 miles away, at the corner of 2 major streets, a night shift security guard sat in his booth watching a small black and white television, a rerun of an old comedy show. He laughed at the antics on screen, completely unaware that 3 young men had been eliminated within 2 miles of his location. The smell of his coffee and a honey bun from the gas station filled his booth. In 2 hours, when his shift ended, he'd drive home through streets that would be crawling with police tape and flashing lights. But for now, he just laughed and sipped his coffee, oblivious to the darkness unfolding around him. At 2:15, the middle son drove Marcus and the youngest to a house near Outer Drive where Andre Simmons lived. Andre was 23, rented the upper apartment, worked part-time at a car wash, trying to make legitimate money to supplement what he earned on the streets. They found him sitting on his front steps, smoking a cigarette, looking at a pager that kept going off with codes that meant business was calling. He looked up when the car pulled to the curb, saw the Marcus Williams getting out. Andre stood slowly, hands raised. "Mr. Williams, I know what this is about. I know what happened Thursday. That was wrong, man. That was dead wrong." "Then why didn't you stop it?" Marcus walked closer, the weapon hanging at his side. "I wasn't there for most of it. By the time I came out the store, you were already down. I didn't touch you. I swear on my mama, I didn't touch you. But you were there. You saw it happen." Marcus stopped 6 feet away. 37 people saw. Not one stopped it. "What you want me to say? That I should have jumped in, gotten myself beat down too?" Andre's voice rose. "Man, I got a little sister I'm trying to keep in school. I got a mama with bills. I can't afford to make enemies out here. And I couldn't afford to let 37 people watch me get beat like a dog and do nothing." Marcus raised the weapon. "We all make choices, young brother. That night you made yours. Please, please, Mr. Williams. I got people depending." The shot cut him off. Andre fell backward on his own front steps. The pager on his belt kept going off. Codes flashing that no one would ever answer. Marcus stood there, weapon still raised. His sons behind him, both of them silent. The void where emotions should be had become absolute. At 2:33, while Marcus Williams stood over Andre Simmons' body, dawn was still 3 hours away. But the sky had that quality, that subtle shift from absolute black to the faintest suggestion of gray. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed from someone's illegal backyard coop. A dog barked. Life continuing, indifferent to death. Meanwhile, His oldest son and nephew found Darius Coleman at his house on Harper Avenue. Darius was 26, the oldest of Dwayne's regular crew. Had been trying to get out of the game for 2 years but kept getting pulled back. Bills, responsibilities, the simple mathematics of survival in a city that offered few legal options for young black men with high school diplomas and no connections. The oldest son knocked on the door. When Darius opened it, the young man raised his weapon before Darius could speak. "You know why we're here." Darius looked at the gun, looked at the face, recognized him as Marcus Williams's oldest son. Understanding came fast. "Your father is making a mistake. A huge mistake. This isn't how—" "Thursday night on that avenue, you were there, man. Half the east side was there. You going to eliminate half the city?" "Just the ones who put their hands on my father. Just the ones who took his respect like it was nothing." Darius stepped back. "I got a daughter, man, 8 years old. She ain't got nobody but me." The oldest son's hand shook. For the first time that night, hesitation crept in. A daughter, 8 years old. The nephew stepped up, took the weapon from the older cousin's hand. "I got this. Wait." But the nephew didn't wait. The shot echoed through Harper Avenue. Darius fell across his threshold, half in and half out of his house, the door wide open behind him. The oldest son stood there looking at his cousin. "I could have done it." "I know, but you didn't have to." The nephew handed the weapon back. "That's what family's for." They walked back to their car. 2 more names crossed off an invisible list. 2 more souls added to a debt they'd never be able to repay. 4 names remained. 4 young men who at that moment were still alive, completely unaware. At 3:15, they found Jerome Washington at a house where he sometimes stayed with his girlfriend. Jerome was 21, medium build, had a scar over his left eye from a bottle fight 2 years back. He came out of the house heading to his car. Probably got word that something was happening, probably trying to get somewhere safe. He saw 4 men waiting by his car. He ran, made it half a block before the middle son caught him in an empty lot between 2 abandoned houses. Jerome was fast, but the middle son had played football in high school. Still had that speed. "Wait, wait, wait," Jerome gasped, hands up. "I know what this is. I know, but listen. Thursday was Dwayne's call. We just followed orders. You know how it works? The man says, 'Jump, you jump.' My father asked for respect. You gave him a beating." The middle son's voice was cold. "That wasn't following orders. That was a choice. I'm sorry, okay? What you want me to say? I'm sorry we did it." Sorry doesn't give my father his wedding ring back. Sorry doesn't erase 37 witnesses. Jerome tried to bolt again. The youngest son grabbed him, held him. The kid was small, maybe 140. Reminded the youngest of himself 2 years ago, just trying to survive in streets that ate young men alive. "Please," Jerome whispered. "I'm 21, same age as you, brother. We're the same." The youngest looked at his older brother. Something passed between them. A moment of shared understanding that what they were doing was wrong, was irreversible, was going to haunt them forever. But they did it anyway, the shot. Jerome fell in the empty lot, surrounded by broken glass and weeds growing through cracked concrete. The youngest threw up in the corner of the lot, his body finally rebelling against what his mind had accepted. Marcus found them there 5 minutes later. Looked at the body. Looked at his youngest son bent over dry heaving. Looked at his middle son standing there with the weapon hanging loose in his hand. 2 left, Marcus said quietly. Dwayne's little brother Ronald, and Dwayne himself. His middle son's voice was raw. Ronald wasn't even there Thursday night. He's 19, still in school. He's trying to get out. He's Dwayne's brother. He wasn't there. Marcus stood in that empty lot, surrounded by his sons and nephew, all of them covered in gunpowder residue and moral contamination. The line had been crossed hours ago. But was there a line even further? Was there a point where you stopped being a man seeking justice and became just another monster? Ronald gets a pass, Marcus said finally, but Dwayne doesn't. Dwayne answers for all of it. At 4 a.m, they found Dwayne Harris exactly where Marcus knew he'd be. His mother's house sat on a quiet residential street, a modest brick structure with a well-maintained lawn and a porch light that stayed on all night because Patricia Harris worried about her sons. Dwayne's burgundy Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme gleamed in the driveway, even in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus parked across the street and sat there looking at the house. Behind that door was the man who'd started all this, the man who'd beaten him, the man who'd taken his wife's ring. "How we doing this?" his oldest son asked. "I do it alone." "Dad, alone. This is between me and him." Marcus got out of the car and walked across the street. The Colt hung in his right hand. 7 rounds in the magazine, more than enough. He knocked on the door, waited, knocked again. Patricia Harris opened it, hair wrapped in a scarf, bathrobe pulled tight. 52 years old, tired eyes, hands swollen from years of nursing work. She looked at Marcus, looked at the weapon, understood immediately. "My boy's not here. Miss Patricia, don't lie for him, not tonight. He's not here. He left an hour ago when he heard." She stopped herself. "Please, Mr. Williams. I know what happened Thursday. I know my boy was wrong, but he's still my boy. And I'm still a father, still a man who deserves respect. Killing him won't bring you respect, just bring you prison, bring you hell." Marcus looked at this woman he'd known for 10 years, who'd always been kind, who'd raised her sons as best she could in a city that gave them few choices. "Where is he?" Patricia Harris closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears ran down her face. "Connor Avenue, Kesha's place. But please, he's got a little girl, 3 years old. You take her daddy, you destroy that baby." "Thursday night, your son destroyed my family. All I'm doing is balancing the scales." Marcus turned and walked back to his car. Behind him, he heard Patricia Harris collapse against her doorframe, sobbing. The sound followed him across the street, climbed into the car with him, sat in the passenger seat like an unwelcome guest. "Connor Avenue," Marcus said. "Let's end this." Kesha's apartment building had seen better days. The stairwell smelled like urine and mildew. Someone had spray-painted gang tags on the walls. A light fixture hung by wires, dead bulbs swinging in a breeze from a broken window. Marcus climbed the stairs alone. His sons and nephew waited below, backup if needed, witnesses to the final act. He knocked on apartment 2C, waited, knocked again harder. The door opened. Dwayne Harris stood there in a white t-shirt and basketball shorts, sleep still in his eyes. Then he saw Marcus, saw the weapon. Sleep vanished instantly. They looked at each other. 2 men separated by 17 years, but connected by Thursday night. Connected by a 3-minute beating that had spiraled into this moment. "You killed my crew," Dwayne said. Not a question. All of them except your brother. Ronald gets to live. He wasn't there. Man, this is insane. You killed 7 people over a street corner beef. Over respect, over 37 people watching a man get beaten and doing nothing. Over you taking my wife's wedding ring like it meant nothing. Dwayne's jaw tightened. "That ring, man, I didn't even know. Brandon took it. I made him give it back." "Where is it?" "My car, glove compartment. Was going to return it, but..." He stopped. Doesn't matter now, does it? No, it doesn't. Behind Dwayne, Marcus could hear sounds of life, cartoons playing on a television, a child's voice saying, "Daddy, who's at the door?" Jasmine, 3 years old, about to lose her father. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. This was it, the final name, the man who'd started it all. "You got a daughter," Marcus said. "Yeah, Jasmine, she's 3. She loves cartoons and chicken nuggets and thinks her daddy's a superhero." Dwayne's voice cracked. "She don't know what I do, what I am. She just knows I'm her daddy. I had a wife, 23 years married, fought cancer for 8 months before it took her. That ring you took, that was the last piece of her I had." They stood there in the doorway, both men with their reasons, both men with people they loved, both men trapped in a cycle of violence that Detroit had created and perpetuated and normalized. "This doesn't have to happen," Dwayne said. "You made your point. 7 dead, that's more than enough. Whole city's going to know you're not to be messed with. I finish what I start, then my daughter grows up without a father. Just like your sons almost grew up without theirs when you were overseas. You know what that's like. Don't do that to her." Marcus did know. Had spent 13 months in Vietnam while his oldest and middle sons were babies, while his wife raised them alone. Had missed first steps, first words, first everything. The thought of being absent had terrified him. His hand shook. For the first time that night, genuine doubt crept in. "Daddy?" Jasmine appeared behind Dwayne's legs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Small, innocent, wearing purple pajamas with cartoon characters on them. "Who's that man?" Dwayne picked up his daughter, held her against his chest, looked at Marcus with tears running down his face. "Please." Not in front of her. Marcus stood there, weapon raised, looking at a 3-year-old girl who could have been his own granddaughter. Thought about legacy, about what kind of man kills a father in front of his child, about lines that once crossed destroy whatever humanity remains. He lowered the weapon. "Get the ring from your car, bring it to me." Dwayne's eyes widened. "You serious?" "Get it now before I change my mind." Dwayne handed Jasmine to someone inside. Kesha, probably. Marcus heard her voice, confused, frightened. Dwayne ran down the stairs out to his car, came back 2 minutes later with a gold wedding band. He handed it to Marcus. "That's it, that's the ring." Marcus took it, looked at the inscription inside, the one he'd had engraved in 1962. He slipped it onto his finger. After 4 days, it was home. "This doesn't make us even," Marcus said. 7 of your crew are dead. You're alive because of your daughter, not because you deserved mercy. I know. But if I ever see you anywhere near me or my sons, I finish what I started tonight. We clear?" "Crystal." Marcus turned and started down the stairs. Made it 3 steps before Dwayne called out, "Mr. Williams." Marcus stopped, didn't turn around. "Thursday night, that was wrong, what we did. I knew it was wrong even while it was happening. I'm sorry. I know that don't fix nothing, but I'm sorry." Marcus continued down the stairs without responding. What was there to say? Sorry didn't bring back 7 young men. Sorry didn't erase the blood on everyone's hands. Sorry was just a word people said when the damage was already done. The sun was starting to rise over Detroit, turning the sky from black to gray to the faintest suggestion of pink. Marcus sat in his car with his sons and nephew, all of them silent. The killing was done. 7 men eliminated over 6 hours. The bloodiest night in East Side Detroit since the riots 20 years earlier. Marcus looked at his hands. His wife's ring back on his finger where it belonged. But his hands, these hands that had held his sons, that had worked assembly lines, that had built a life, were now a killer's hands. The void where emotion should be had become absolute. "What do we do now?" his oldest son asked quietly. Marcus stared at the dawn breaking over the city, the same sun that rose over Vietnam, over the Chrysler plant, over his wife's grave, the same sun that would shine on Detroit whether they lived or died, whether they were heroes or monsters. We go home, we wash up, we wait for them to come, and then we face what we did. Marcus started the engine. The transmission slipped between gears as they drove through streets that would soon be crawling with police cars and crime scene tape. 4 men who'd crossed a line no human being should cross, carrying the weight of 7 dead and knowing they'd carry it for the rest of their lives. But the blood had been shed, the debt had been paid, and in 4 hours, when a terrified witness called 911 about bodies scattered across the east side, Detroit would wake to discover what happens when ordinary men are pushed past their limits in a city that had forgotten how to protect its own. 9 hours after the last shot, at 2:17 in the afternoon on Sunday, Evelyn Lewis walked to her corner store like she did every afternoon. 71 years old, moved slow because of arthritis in her knees, carried her shopping bag and her Sunday church bulletin. The temperature had climbed back to 89 degrees. The smell of someone grilling chicken drifted from a backyard 3 houses down. She was thinking about making potato salad for dinner, thinking about her grandson Brandon, who'd come home late the night before and left early this morning without saying where he was going. That boy worried her. Always running the streets, keeping bad company. The cashier at the store, a man who'd owned it for 6 years, looked strange when she came in. Pale, shaken. "Miss Evelyn," he said carefully, "you should go home, lock your doors." "What you talking about? People are dead, many people. Last night, police everywhere, they saying it was—" He stopped. "Just go home, please." Evelyn Lewis walked back to her house faster than her knees wanted to allow. Found 2 Detroit police cruisers parked in front. Officers on her porch. One of them holding his hat in his hands the way they do when bringing bad news. "Ma'am, are you Evelyn Lewis?" "Yes. What's this about?" "Is Brandon Lewis your grandson?" Ice in her chest. "Yes, what happened? Is he hurt?" The officer, young, maybe 26, looked at his partner before answering. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you that Brandon was found deceased early this morning. We believe he was the victim of a homicide." Evelyn Lewis heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Deceased, homicide, her grandson. The boy she'd raised after his mother ran off. The boy who'd eaten breakfast at her table just yesterday morning. "No," she said simply. "No, that's not right. He was here last night. He's probably sleeping somewhere. He does that sometimes." But they weren't wrong. And by 3 in the afternoon, as news spread through the east side like wildfire, 6 more families would receive similar visits. 6 more families would have officers standing on their porches with hats in hands, speaking words that destroyed everything. At that moment, while Evelyn Lewis collapsed on her porch and Officer Patterson tried to catch her, 3 miles south Normal Sunday afternoon continued. Families laughing and talking about dinner plans. Nobody there knew yet that 7 families would never be whole again. By 4:30, Detective William Henderson arrived at the first crime scene. 48 years old, 22 years with Detroit Police Department, had worked homicide for the last 7. He'd seen plenty of bodies, drive-bys, domestic violence, drug deals gone wrong, random robberies. Detroit in 1987 gave him more than enough work. But walking up to Kevin Thompson's mother's house and seeing the crime scene tape, seeing the chalk outline, seeing the bloodstain on the concrete that nobody had cleaned yet, something about this felt different. The scene told a story. Single shot, close range, professional. The victim never had time to draw his own weapon. They'd found a revolver in his waistband, unfired. No signs of struggle, just execution. Detective Henderson interviewed Kevin's mother, Gloria Thompson. 56 years old, worked as a nursing assistant at the hospital. She sat at her kitchen table surrounded by photos of her son at various ages. He was trying, she said, voice hollow. Working at the mechanic shop during the day. Yeah, he ran with Dwayne's crew at night, but he was trying to save money. Wanted to go back to school, get his certificate in auto repair. Did Kevin have any disputes with anyone? Anyone who might want to hurt him? She looked at Detective Henderson with eyes that had already seen too much loss in her life. You asking me if I know who did this? Yes, ma'am. Marcus Williams and his boys. That's who did this. Everybody on the east side knows it. Henderson stopped writing. Marcus Williams on Mulholland Street, the vet. That's the one. Thursday night, Dwayne's crew beat him on that avenue, took his wedding ring. Marcus decided to make them pay for it. By 6, reports had come in from 6 more locations. Bodies at every location, all shot, all members of the same crew, all killed within a 6-hour window. Lieutenant Raymond Cooper, head of Detroit Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, arrived at the command center they'd set up at the precinct. 54 years old, veteran of 28 years in law enforcement. He looked at the map on the wall. 7 red pins marking 7 bodies scattered across the east side. Looked at the timeline, looked at the pattern. This wasn't gang violence, Cooper said to Henderson and 3 other detectives. Gang violence is chaotic, retaliatory. This was systematic, planned military precision. Marcus Williams served in Vietnam, Henderson said. Bronze Star, combat infantry. Oldest son tried to enlist but got rejected for bad knees. Families disciplined, known for keeping their heads down until Thursday. Cooper studied the map. What happened Thursday? Henderson pulled out a statement. Multiple witnesses. Thursday night, approximately 9:30. Corner of 2 major streets. Marcus Williams was walking home when he had an altercation with Dwayne Harris's crew. 6 young men beat Williams in front of approximately 37 witnesses. Took his wallet and his wedding ring. His wedding ring, Cooper repeated. Yes, sir. Wife died 2 years ago from cancer. Ring was all he had left of her. Cooper was quiet for a long moment. So, this was about honor, about respect, about revenge. Maybe both. Cooper looked at the board. How many shooters based on shell casings and witness statements? Minimum 4, multiple calibers, all fired within the timeline. So, Williams and his 3 sons, the whole family. Cooper shook his head. 7 dead over a street corner beating. 8 targets, Henderson corrected. 8th one survived, Dwayne Harris himself. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Harris is alive? Yes, sir, and he's willing to talk. The story that emerged over the next few hours painted a picture of systematic revenge, unlike anything Detroit had seen. Not random violence, not gang warfare, but calculated elimination carried out with military precision by a family that had reached its breaking point. The news spread through Detroit like wildfire. 7 dead, the Williams family responsible. Television crews set up outside the precinct. Newspapers ran headlines about East Side Massacre and family vendetta. In the neighborhood, reactions were divided. Some said Marcus Williams was a monster who'd murdered young men in cold blood. Others said he was a desperate father, driven to extreme measures by disrespect that couldn't stand. The city split, and everyone knew that whatever justice eventually came, the East Side would carry this scar forever. At 6 in the morning on Tuesday, 8 officers approached the house on Mulholland Street. 3 marked vehicles, 1 unmarked. body armor under their shirts, hands near their weapons. They expected resistance, expected maybe a final standoff. What they found was Marcus Williams sitting on his front porch, unarmed, hands visible on his knees. His 3 sons standing behind him, also unarmed, also calm. No sign of weapons anywhere. Detective Henderson got out of his vehicle first, walked slowly up the cracked concrete walkway to the porch where he'd sometimes seen Marcus working on his lawnmower. Marcus, Detective Henderson. Marcus's face was bruised, swollen, the beating from Thursday night still visible. "I expect you're here about this weekend." "You know I am." "Then let's get it done. No point making this harder than it needs to be." Marcus stood slowly, turned around, put his hands behind his back. Henderson put the handcuffs on personally. The sons filed out next, all of them surrendering without resistance. No drama, no final shootout, just 4 men who'd crossed a line and now had to pay the price, accepting it with grim determination. As Henderson walked Marcus to the patrol car, he couldn't help but ask the question that had been eating at him since Sunday. "Was it worth it, Marcus?" Marcus looked at his house, the place he'd bought with his wife in 1972, where he'd raised his sons, where they'd built a life. Looked at his boys being loaded into separate cars. Looked at the August sun rising over the east side, same as it always had. "Ask me in 20 years," he said. By Tuesday afternoon, all 4 Williams men sat in holding cells, 8 counts of first-degree murder. If convicted, they'd spend the rest of their lives in prison. Life without parole was the most likely outcome. But the question that haunted Detective Henderson, the question that haunted Lieutenant Cooper, the question that haunted every person on the east side who'd heard the story, was simple and terrible. Had Marcus Williams done the right thing? Was he a desperate father protecting his family's honor in a city that offered no other options? Or was he a mass murderer who dressed up his crimes in the language of respect? And where exactly was the line between justice and vengeance when the law had abandoned your neighborhood? When 37 people watched you get beaten and did nothing? When the only currency left was violence? No one had an answer. Just grief and rage and the terrible knowledge that in 1987 Detroit, sometimes ordinary men were pushed to extraordinary darkness. And once you crossed that line, there was no coming back. The trial of Marcus Anthony Williams and his 3 sons began in February of 1988 in a Wayne County courtroom downtown. The venue couldn't be changed. There was nowhere in Michigan that hadn't heard about what the media called the East Side Massacre. 32 combined charges of first-degree murder. 7 dead, 4 defendants. The prosecution had Dwayne Harris's testimony, forensic evidence linking the weapons to the Williams family, shell casings recovered from multiple crime scenes, and a timeline so detailed it left no room for reasonable doubt. The defense, 4 court-appointed attorneys who looked overwhelmed from day one, attempted to argue that Marcus had acted under extreme emotional disturbance brought on by the August 13th beating and the trauma of losing his wife, his job, and his dignity. They painted a picture of a good man driven to madness by a city that had abandoned him. No police protection in his neighborhood, no economic opportunities, no justice when he was beaten in front of 37 witnesses. The prosecution destroyed that argument in under 2 hours. Extreme emotional disturbance doesn't involve 2 days of planning, doesn't involve acquiring untraceable weapons, doesn't involve systematic execution of 7 young men over 6 hours. This wasn't temporary insanity. This was premeditated revenge dressed up in the language of honor and respect. The jury, 12 Detroit residents who understood street life but hadn't lived on the East Side in 1987, deliberated for 19 hours over 3 days. Guilty on all charges, all 4 defendants. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Marcus Anthony Williams, life without parole. His oldest son, life without parole. His middle son, 40 years to life. His youngest, 35 years to life given his age at the time of the crimes. When the judge read the sentences, Marcus Williams showed no emotion. No tears, no shock, just that same cold clarity he'd felt the night of the massacre. He'd known from the moment he pulled that first trigger exactly where he'd end up. Marcus Anthony Williams served 27 years in a correctional facility in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. During that time, he worked in the prison library, helping other inmates prepare for their GED exams. He was quiet, respected even by hardened criminals, never sought trouble. Guards said he was one of the most disciplined inmates they'd ever known. The military training never left him. In 2003, at age 59, Marcus became an ordained minister through a prison correspondence program, started leading Sunday services in the chapel, counseled younger inmates about violence, about choices, about the weight you carry when you cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Some of those young men listened, most didn't. He wrote letters to the victims' families every year on the anniversary of the massacre. Most went unanswered. A few were returned unopened. Gloria Thompson, Kevin's mother, wrote back once in 2005. "Your apologies don't bring my son back. Your prayers don't erase what you did. But I forgive you anyway because carrying hate for 18 years has already destroyed too much of my life." Marcus kept that letter in his cell until the day he died. On November 3, 2015, exactly 30 years after his wife's death, Marcus Williams suffered a massive stroke during morning count. He died in the prison infirmary at 6:42 in the morning, 71 years old. The chaplain on duty reported that Marcus's last coherent words were, "Tell my boys I'm sorry. Tell her I tried to protect them. Tell her I'm sorry I failed." Whether he believed that in his final moment or was clinging to justifications that had sustained him for 27 years behind bars, nobody knows. He was buried next to his wife. The headstone reads simply, Marcus Anthony Williams, 1944 to 2015. Beloved husband and father. May he find the peace he sought. His oldest son remains incarcerated. He's 61 now. Parole denied in 1998, 2008, 2018, and 2023. He obtained his bachelor's degree through correspondence courses, works as a teaching assistant in the prison education program. In a 2020 interview with a University of Michigan criminology student, he said, "My father taught us to protect family at any cost. That night, the cost was 7 lives and our freedom. Some lessons you learned too late." His middle son was paroled in 2018 after serving 30 years. He's 56 now, lives in a halfway house, works at a car wash, attends therapy twice a week. He hasn't spoken to his older brother since 2009. Couldn't reconcile what they'd done. In the few interviews he's granted, he speaks carefully. "I was 21. Thought I was protecting my father. Thought I was defending family honor. Now I'm 56 and I still see their faces every night. Andre begging on his front steps. Jerome running through that empty lot. Those images don't fade. They just become part of who you are." The youngest son struggled most with incarceration. Multiple suicide attempts in the first 5 years. Psychiatric medications, solitary confinement for his own protection. He found religion in 1995, became a different person, was paroled in 2012 at age 43. He moved to Chicago, changed his name legally, and works as a youth counselor trying to keep young men away from the streets that destroyed his family. He's married now, has 2 daughters he's never told about what their father did. Maybe someday, not yet. The victims' families carried their own weight. Gloria Thompson, Kevin's mother, never fully recovered. She raised her granddaughter alone after Kevin's daughter's mother proved unable to cope. Gloria died in 2004 at age 73. Heart failure, the doctor said. But people who knew her said it was a broken heart that finally gave out after 17 years. Evelyn Lewis, Brandon's grandmother, sold her house in 1989. Couldn't walk past the corner where they'd found his body. She moved to Highland Park, lived quietly until her death in 2011 at 95. She never spoke about the massacre. When reporters found her on anniversaries, she'd close the door without a word. Dwayne Harris kept his word. He testified at trial, giving detailed accounts that helped secure convictions. Then he disappeared. Left Detroit in 1989, moved to Atlanta, started a legitimate auto repair business, changed his life completely. He's 64 now, remarried, has 5 children, including Jasmine, who's now 40, and works as an elementary school teacher. She knows what happened, knows her father's crew was eliminated, knows Marcus Williams spared her father because of her. Detroit's East Side changed after that August weekend in 1987. For a few years, the street violence decreased slightly. Nobody wanted to be the next Marcus Williams or the next crew to push someone too far. Community organizations held meetings about respect, about conflict resolution, about alternatives to violence. But the change wasn't permanent. Within 5 years, new people had moved in who didn't remember. New crews formed. New territorial disputes arose. Human nature being what it is, the lessons faded. The story of the Detroit vengeance became a cautionary tale told across urban America. Don't push a desperate man. Don't humiliate a father in public. Don't underestimate what ordinary people will do when they have nothing left to lose and the system offers no protection. Marcus Williams' story has no heroes. It has a father who loved his family more than his own life, and 7 young men who'd made choices, some cruel, some simply following a crew leader they respected, that set a tragedy in motion. It has a system that failed at every level. Economic collapse that destroyed Detroit's black middle class. Police that couldn't protect East Side neighborhoods. A street code so rigid it made violence seem like the only option left. And 37 witnesses who stood by while a man was beaten because that's what survival in 1987 Detroit required. Was Marcus Williams a murderer? Yes. He eliminated 7 people with premeditation and planning, tracked them across the city over 6 hours, showed no mercy to men who begged for their lives. Was he a desperate father, driven to extremes by circumstances beyond his control? Also, yes. The uncomfortable truth is both things can be true simultaneously, and that's the most disturbing part of this story because it forces us to ask questions we'd rather avoid. What would we do in his place? How far would we go to protect our dignity when humiliated in front of dozens of witnesses? Does justice exist when police won't come to your neighborhood? When 37 people watch you get beaten and do nothing? Is there a line between righteous anger and unforgivable violence? Or does extreme pressure erase that line entirely? Marcus Williams crossed a boundary no human being should cross. But that boundary existed in a world where authorities had abandoned entire neighborhoods, where economic opportunity had evaporated, where respect was the only currency that mattered because everything else had been taken away, where an honest father facing humiliation had nowhere to turn except to violence. There's no easy answer, no clear moral, no satisfying conclusion where good triumphs and evil is punished. Just a simple and terrible truth. Violence breeds more violence. Broken systems create their own monsters. And sometimes the line between justice and revenge becomes so thin it disappears entirely, leaving only blood and questions and families destroyed on both sides. 37 years have passed since that August night on Detroit's East Side. The city hasn't healed. It's evolved, adapted, found new ways to struggle. Every year, families face impossible choices when systems fail them. Every year, some choose violence. The house where Marcus Williams raised his sons was foreclosed in 1989. It sold to a new family in 1995. They knew nothing of its history. Their children play in the yard where Marcus sat that last night before the massacre, loading weapons and making peace with what he was about to become. Kevin Thompson's mother's house still stands. A different family lives there now. They repainted the porch where Kevin fell, but sometimes on quiet nights, neighbors say they can still feel the weight of what happened there. The corner where Marcus was beaten looks like any other Detroit street corner. Liquor store with security bars, cracked sidewalk, no memorial, no plaque. The city just moved on. Life continued as it always does, covering scars with layers of normalcy until they almost disappear. Revenge doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't restore lost dignity. It only creates new dead, new wounds, new innocence destroyed. Marcus Williams defended his family's honor but lost his soul. He eliminated 7 threats but created 7 shattered families. He won a battle for respect but lost the war against his own humanity. And in the end, he died in a prison infirmary, 71 years old, surrounded by guards instead of the sons he tried to protect. Only one question remains, one each of us must answer for ourselves. When the system fails, when no one helps, when respect is all you have left, how far would you go? Where do you draw the line? And once you cross it, can you ever come back? If this story made you think about justice, revenge, and the price we pay for protecting those we love, leave your like and share this video. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories that challenge what we think we know about right and wrong, about law and morality, about how far we're willing to go when pushed to the edge. Comment below. What would you have done in Marcus Williams' position? Where do you draw the line between justice and vengeance? Because these stories aren't just from the past. They're happening right now somewhere in forgotten neighborhoods where the system has failed and desperation takes hold. The names change, the cities change, but the fundamental question remains. What transforms a decent father into something else entirely? And are we all just one humiliation, one broken promise, one desperate moment away from crossing lines we never thought we'd cross? Until next time, remember, the monsters we fear aren't always born that way. Sometimes they're made. One beating, one stolen ring, one night when honor demands blood, and the only justice available comes from the barrel of a gun.